You can start.
Thank you.
You're
Hi,
welcome.
everyone. Thank you very much to Irina and Alois and the STS group and the InfoLit discussion chat committee that is allowing me this opportunity to have this discussion with you all about something I'm really proud of. Welcome to the March 2018 ACRL STS Information Literacy Discussion Chat. My name is Sue Wainscott, even though the participants list shows my full given name, Susan. If you call me that, I'll think I'm in trouble. I've been Sue since high school. But I'd like to share with you today a lesson that I implemented with a colleague, and then I have some discussion questions, but please do add things into the chat box if you have questions along the way. I think I'll be able to see it, and if not, it'll flash up on the screen, and hopefully I'll see that prompt. So what I did and what I'd like to share with you all is a lesson that I presented to students, upper class geoscience students. And I did this with my colleague, Dr. Bondi, and we wrote about it in a book chapter that's out and about and also posted in our institutional repository. And Dr. Bondi is a wonderful colleague in the geoscience department, and we were developing a refreshed lesson for the advanced field geology field class component of the kind of the culminating experience for our geoscience students. And it's an interesting course in that they are beginning to do tangible things that they might need to do as professionals. And the challenging part of it, if you're not familiar with field camp experience, is that they do prep work connected to the grid, and then they go out to an unknown location, and then they have to describe it on the ground, and then they come back and supplement what they saw and observed and drew and documented in the field without the grid, without the internet. They write up a report. So it's really tangible test of what they've learned to that point, and then it really challenges their information lit skills to find things when they get back in once they have a place name to research. It's lovely. I often see these students out in the lobby of Lead Library working on their paper maps, which is a delightful thing to see because I know they use the GIS software as well, but it's neat to see tangible evidence of student work splayed out on 2-3 tables at a time. So what we used to do is we used to give the standard spiel about here's all the wonderful resources that we have available for you, as seamless as possible, a route to full text sources or items on shelves. Occasionally they would need to request things through Interlibrary Loan, and they would have a little bit of a delay in their gratification, but we have some really nice subscription-based indexes that they can use while they're here. But Josh and I were discussing the previous year's work and realized that these students were going to hit a wall once they graduated. And that wall was going to be rather abrupt because they may or may not land in a job or a situation where they had access to all these lovely resources we were telling them about during their field course. And so we decided that we would introduce them to these resources, but also make them aware that they might lose access to some of them once they graduated. So we were inspired by the information has value threshold concept and frame. And what we chose to do with not a lot of planning, honestly, is we kind of created a situation where I gave a quick lecture and described to them that not all information is free and not all information is easy to access. And then what we had the students do was work in teams to develop, first we had the whole group develop a rubric on how they were going to evaluate different search tools, including databases and Google Scholar. And then we broke them into teams and had them evaluate a set of each team evaluated one tool. And then we had a group discussion about how their ratings went. And then we had a somewhat lengthy discussion about what they would be able to access after they graduated and some different routes that they could seek out to get their information fix, as it were. And in the chapter, Josh and I discussed things that we might do differently in the future. But full disclosure, then we got funding for a new sciences librarian line, and I wasn't able to teach this course with Josh again, so I don't have a follow-up description of what we did with the lesson, and I don't believe that they went the same route with our new sciences librarian. So I wish I had that next phase story to tell. But that's what we did. And in the debrief that we had, we talked about some things we might do different. And it occurs to me more and more, I'm in my 5th year of librarianship, and it occurs to me that this topic is an opportunity that goes well beyond an information literacy session in a class. All of our students, as they graduate, are going to need to figure out how they're going to get their information fix. They're going to need to access materials that they've been exposed to as they go on and become professionals. And wouldn't it be nice if we were helping them build that bridge to the information by helping them figure out how they're going to get it, or at least tell them how to go about researching how to get their information sources and their discovery tools after they graduate. And so it became kind of a side mission of mine, or a side goal of mine, to come up with ways to talk to students before they graduate, immediately after they graduate if they contact me, how to get a personal information access plan. And so I started noticing when people would come to me and would experience that wall, that oh my gosh moment where they realized they could no longer just log into our resources. And I started kind of developing a bit of a script for talking them off the ledge and helping them through that kind of realization that information is not immediately accessible to everyone, and that taking that moment of them realizing kind of the information privilege they had while they were students, and thinking about how they can gain access and also kind of give them a moment of pause and you know, realize that not everybody has access to these things as well, and think that through. And something that I wanted to remember to highlight right here is that while Josh and I really didn't talk about information privilege in our lesson and in our chapter, I'm putting something in the chat box right now. Colleagues of ours at UNLV actually have a chapter in the book that talks explicitly about community access to university information sources and subscriptions. And this is something that I imagine many of us have encountered when friends or colleagues at other institutions just want their PDF. They just want a copy of that thing, and we can't ethically give it to them. We have to explain to them routes to get it. So colleagues Heidi and Anna worked in a service learning-based course where they talk about ways to provide information about information resources to the community that they're working with in their course assignments in an annotated bibliography format. And then their chapter actually discusses information access as a privilege in greater detail. And they're social scientists, so it's more in their bailiwick perhaps to think about these things up front. Josh is a geoscientist. I was a biologist in my former career, so it's not something that we were exposed to, and we didn't have the language to talk about it. So let's see, back to this. So some of the things I've been thinking about in preparing something more formal rather than a reference consultation discussion about developing a personalized information access plan, this is kind of a rough outline. And it's something that I think could be useful for a workshop setting, or offering some sort of exit interviews almost to students as they approach graduation, maybe through student organization connections, or reaching out to soon-to-be alumni. Or even if you can work with the Alumni Association or your colleges to reach out to their recent alumni and have this conversation with them. talking about what can you access right now with the memberships and the access to public libraries and things like that. What can you access right now, and what might you consider adding? A professional organization membership, or maybe it's something that's you're just going to need to have it on your own shelf or your employer's shelf. Because something that we talked about, Josh and I in our geoscience class, was so you can access this information. You need to consider whether or not you can use it for commercial purposes. You need to consider whether or not when you get something through Interlibrary Loan, if you can then take that and print it out and stick it on your employer's shelf for company-wide access, just so that they're aware of that wrinkle in the information landscape. So, before I go on to the next slide, is there any discussion that you all are just itching to have at this point about this idea of a personalized information access plan? You could stick it in the chat box. And while I attempt to wait patiently for my audience, in case you are typing and I can't see that, I'm going to share something now that I was going to share later. University of Oregon, I believe, although I'm not confident, has a Kahoot-based quiz that I found interesting that they have for their graduating students that describes what's available for their alumni. So I just want to give them a huge shout out. And yes, there's a comment in the chat box about people who contact the libraries and are not happy at all. They've hit that information wall and they think we're broken because we aren't providing it to them. I actually have a graduate student who's contemplating her next steps for the next year, and she is actively attempting to figure out how she can continue to work on her manuscripts if she loses access to a couple of resources that are on our shelves and she's not local enough to come visit it once she's an alumni. So if I had all the money in the world, I would gift her a copy of it, but that's not in the works. So, and one of the things to just remind ourselves of, and you probably all don't need reminding of this as much as our disciplinary faculty do sometimes, is that this is a learning opportunity when people hit this wall. Once we can get them to a less emotional state, this is a huge learning opportunity about information access and our information privilege. When people contact us and they're upset, if we can keep that connection going and have the conversation with them, we can get them across that information has access threshold potentially and talk about open access publishing and all those things. Let's see, I'm going to go back to the slides now. There are a couple of other things that I discovered that are of interest around information has value that I thought were related, and maybe something that can inspire folks. And I have links to these I can put in the chat box. And I have not yet submitted anything to the sandbox, but I hope to in future and hope that you all have. I thought that these would be useful things, and particularly the second one, the petroleum engineering related topic. The petroleum industry has in the past been very well funded, so if you land a job in the petroleum industry, you're likely to continue to have access and potentially have access to even more than you had in your university experience. I don't know if that will continue in future. They may have to start cutting back like everybody else has. So there's a whole new community of our students who may be hitting that information access wall upon graduation. It looks like this is where I start the blatant advertisement for the book. Forgive me. But if you can get access to it through your library, I think it would be a useful thing. And we also have another webinar coming up. And again, there's the link to this particular chapter that we're discussing. So at this point, I'd like to open up the floor, the chat box, as it were, for any questions or discussion prompts that you all have. And then I have a 4 of them up my sleeve as well if there's nothing that folks want to chat about immediately. I'm going to post some things in the chat box while I patiently wait for you all. Oh, that's a really good question. Has anybody been able to incorporate this sort of training into other courses? I haven't yet incorporated this into any other courses because when I'm talking to upperclassmen in the engineering college where I'm currently focused, they are extremely focused on their innovation capstone projects, and they can't be bothered to think about anything beyond the next phase of their competition. And I don't see any other posts around that question. And then here's a question about the lesson described in the chapter. We had the students recommend the resources that they evaluated in the lesson, and they were savvy enough to have encountered the ones that we hoped they did. And for the record, the rubric that the students developed was almost exactly what I would have given them. They did a really good job. So I feel like there's not that many opportunities that I have had to teach in the geoscience college. They get a first-year seminar exposure to science literature in general. I think that the faculty over there actually do a really good job of incorporating some of the standards-based information literacy material into their courses along the way without obvious intervention by the libraries. I think they know their literature and they know it's important. So it's a nice partnership to have when we do get into the classes because the students are a little bit ready. Let's see, the next question that I see in the chat box is whether or not I use a template to help them with the info access plan. No, that slide that you saw was actually my first attempt at organizing my thoughts about how I would lead a student through that in a thoughtful fashion. I'm very much an on-the-fly kind of person, as you might have detected. This was a really great opportunity, just as a plug for anyone considering proposing to do one of these. This is a great opportunity to sit and reflect and organize my thoughts around this topic a bit. So thanks again for this opportunity. And if anybody comes up with a template and they want to share it, would probably make a really neat entry in the sandbox or other places where folks can share this information. Oh, thank you for adding the project information literacy report. That's really great. And it was really useful when I think it's cited in the chapter. It ought to be, because one of the organizers of that report actually came and spoke to our libraries. It might be in there. Yeah, there it is. There's a couple of those. There's Lifelong Learning Report as well from Project InfoLit. Are there any more questions from the group? Because I have a few for y'all. All right, I'm going to attempt to advance to the next slide, which is a question. So thinking about when students are developing their, their information access, have you all tried to find what your policy is for community users and for your alumni at your institution? And is it easy to locate and easy to understand from the student perspective. I'm going to share one that I found. Apparently, I'm thinking of Oregon. I must be planning my next vacation. University of Oregon has a nice page with some information about all services for alumni, including their library access, and it's posted within their IT community web pages. And if y'all can find and post yours, this is an opportunity for our community to start building resources for our students. Nudge, nudge. Just in case any of your alumni end up here, this is the UNLV page today. I like this comment very much. It's easy to find, but I'm not sure if it's easy to understand. I feel the same way about ours, and we'll be advocating to improve it, both for the alumni community and for local community members who may be your alumni. We just implemented the Primo Alma package in Nevada, and it's a change management process, so we're still getting it cleaned up. And then I feel we could do better messaging around how community members can get access when they come into the building to electronic resources. And in Nevada, we are a libertarian state that is rather small, if you haven't paid any attention to us. And our public libraries, there are 3 public library systems in the Las Vegas Valley, which has 2 million residents, and goodness only knows how many additional people coming through the valley as short or long-term visitors. We're not well funded, I'll just say that. So there's not a lot of professional level resources available. We do have some neat stuff. I use my public library access for all kinds of goodies, but a geoscientist would not find it terribly useful for their professional needs. I hear that Texas has amazing public library system access to electronic resources, so way to go, Texas. Cool. So this is now a resource for the rest of us when we're helping our students. I thank you all. Oh, I like this comment too, because this is what I used to do. I would sign up for one non-degree seeking graduate credit hour per year back in the day, and that would get me a library card, student level, for a whole year, just signing up for 1 semester's worth of stuff. That's no longer the case. They lock down stuff after the semester is over. So here's my next question. Have any of y'all advocated for your alumni or community members to get additional access? And if so, how'd it go? Because I'm about to do another pitch for better community access to more of our resources. Yeah, I agree. The licensing agreements are hard to navigate, and it takes time to understand what each one includes, and then add on the negotiation effort and how important is it really. One of the things that I think smaller institutions struggle with is just keeping track of all the differences in their licensing agreements. So I think it's safer to have a blanket policy that is most restrictive. But if you had more FTE, you could probably have a resource by resource access statement. Highlighting open access resources. Yeah, and then having discovery tools that highlight or include open access resources. I find that some of the open access gray literature, at least, is not as discoverable because it's not folks who have fee-based products to sell do not have the motivation to include some of the open access materials that they did not also produce. So, excellent. I'm also, I have seen some of the health sciences folks and some of the education folks highlight even to students things that are free discovery tools and free open access materials. So I think that it's an important thing to highlight even to our freshmen, just to make them aware, maybe just start giving them a glimmer of this topic as something to consider. Okay, next question for y'all. Have you ever, when advocating for or selecting stuff that you're going to provide through your university library, has that ever been one of your selection criteria? Access for community and alumni members. Do you even have access to the license agreements to consider this? So I'll just out myself as somebody who hasn't spent effort on this. The only thing I've done is always default to DRM-free publisher versions of ebooks, because then if community members and alumni can come to campus, they may have a way to gain access to those while they're on campus. Yay, we've inspired at least one of us to do a little bit more moving forward. That's great. It's hard to add to the already big pile, but I think if it's ever something we can advocate for, tell the vendors that we're thinking about it, even if it's not the final decision or the highest ranked criteria on our decision matrix. I think it's important that they keep hearing about it. All right, thanks for sticking with us. I am going to post my last questions. When you've conducted reference consultations or had conversation with alumni, do you have things that you try to highlight? What's been the experience with talking to alumni other than, oh my gosh, they're really upset because they don't have a thing they thought they were going to have? Any tips or tricks that we can share? Ooh, cool. Now we have Wichita State's access info. Yeah, I do try to emphasize interlibrary loan at public libraries, and we'll even do the Google search for what's the closest branch and system and give them the ILL link. But honestly, I haven't used our public library system's interlibrary loan, so I don't know. In like 10 years ago, I asked for too many things at a time and was asked to pay fees for interlibrary loan at a public library, so I don't know what the policies are these days. The other thing that happens to our alumni is we have a fabulous, fabulous staff in our interlibrary loan department who are very efficient at the easy things and are willing to go the extra mile and then some for the difficult to access things. So our graduate students get a wee bit spoiled. So I think they're going to have high expectations of all librarians everywhere. I have an envelope on my bulletin board that I'm looking at right now that has all sorts of Japanese characters on it because it's an example of going above and beyond to get a copy of a thing. I love interlibrary loan. All right, I just want to thank you all for bearing with us through some technical difficulties and some time zone issues, and thank you for your participation, and I hope you keep sharing and keep the discussion going and supporting our alumni and each other's alumni among our communities. And if there are any other questions, I'm happy to kind of moderate the discussion. But other than that, I thank you for your time this morning, or this afternoon for most of us.